now. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this show. I have the wonderful Reverend David Parry with us again because, thank you, David, for joining us. I've had many people getting in touch. Well, I've been doing some Steiner readings and people have been wanting me to go more deeply into what Rudolf Steiner says about Lucifer and Ahriman. So I thought, what better than to have a conversation about it? And David, thank you very much for joining us. I would like to throw you in at the deep end and say, what do you know about what Rudolf Steiner was saying about Lucifer and Ahriman?
Oh my God. The trouble is his writings are voluminous and he develops themes in different parts of the corpus, different areas at different times. Therefore, it's unless you've read the whole shenanigans, unless you've read the whole lot, it's quite difficult to know what he himself is aiming at above broad brushstrokes. Excuse me, and I defy anybody to say they've read the whole thing. You know, I mean, Steiner is, if ever we needed evidence for the fact there's an adept, you know, there are adepts, there are people who've reached a higher level of consciousness, motivation, at least they're touching it or touching it regularly. You know, people who just won't stop with their output and still manage to lead a life. If we're looking for evidence of them in the West, I think it's quite easy to pinpoint in the East. Excuse me, but in the West, I mean, he's the clear example. It's basically him and G.I. Joe Gurdjieff. You know, who else? Who else is there? I mean, apart from Big Al, but we all know he's a pain in the arse. An interesting one, but a pain in the ass. So, you know, it's obviously Steiner. I mean, I think everyone, right, this is where the AS jump on me if they ever hear this show. I think everybody's reading him wrong, right? So I suspect so the bottom line is he's saying there's nothing these boys and girls on the Ganges know that we don't know. Right? There's nothing in Tibet, there's nothing in Mongolia that they have discovered, and he doesn't deny the depth and he doesn't deny the profundity of everything that they've done. That never crosses his mind. People must never forget he was a practicing member of the Theosophical Society. He rose very highly into its ranks. At no point did he repudiate any of those teachings or any of those thoughts. He certainly thought some needed developing and enhancing. He certainly takes exception to certain ideas from the East he feels are just misunderstood by the person who's talking about them, or the implications have been misunderstood. You know, from what I recall many years ago, he jumps on people that talk too easily about reincarnation. Reincarnation is a central stream in what he thinks and what he writes about. But he's very aware that, you know, the subtleties of Indian philosophy, and I love the New Age, don't get me wrong, New Age people, I love the New Age, but sometimes it's, you know, you're born again like Auntie Flo and Uncle Joe, it's just in a different place and a bit further on in time, which is not quite what anyone in the East is talking about. And of course there are rows over there, you know, like here, there are rows in the philosophical schools, there are rows about the monks, because we're all trying to learn and understand what all these things are. So he's quite sharp occasionally with people that think they've hammered it down, they've held it down, because he wants to say, well, look, basically you haven't. I mean, how could you? You know, and there's always one other philosopher, there's always one other mystic that he manages to put out of the hat, which completely contradicts everybody else. So, and more power to him. What he wanted to say was the Western mysteries stand their own ground. The Western mysteries are also without par, in which case, what does that mean about Christianity? And there the million-dollar question suddenly arises. Are we just to say it's basically been burdensome for the last 2,000 years? Some people do want to say that. And that just strikes me as odd. Right? You mean everything Christianity has ever done? Like the Gothic cathedrals, like the music, like the poetry, you know, the social initiatives. Yes, there have been wars, inquisitions. We all know where it's gone wrong. But maybe we need to balance the picture by looking at what went right and why did it go right in those times and places, and what was it they were looking at. You know, so there are major, that's a long answer. There are major disjunctions, dysfunctions, like when the Catholic Church declares a crusade against the Cathars. We all know that's insulting to the angels. We all know that. Why didn't they know it then? Or did they? You know, and with these saintly perfecti, I mean, there are weird rumors going around that part of France to this day, in Languedoc, weird rumors, that 4 priests divided the book of love between them. Was there a book of love? Was there a book written by Jesus Christ personally, who gives his opinion on all of these things? And it was such dynamite, maybe. Because even if that's true, did he actually talk about the things we thought he talked about? Or is it something else? You know, did they, as they were laying siege to the castles, actually divide it and take the 4 sections to the 4 corners of the earth? You know, so it's obviously symbolic, but maybe it's not simply symbolic. So we all know what the mainline churches did wrong. But you have Martin Luther Kings, you know, you have all sorts of people. Like you have saintly Quakers, you know, you think of the heavy artillery one end, you know, Russian Orthodoxy, Greek Orthodoxy, the Roman Catholic Church, and they've had some saints as well as sinners, we mustn't forget that. You know, all the way down to little Methodists who believe the world can be made a better place if we all just pull our weight. I think that's gorgeous. You know, all the way down to Unitarians. My God, if ever there are a group of Western mystic Hindus, it's the Unitarians. You know, everything is one, daddy-o. You know, so that's them. And I spent some time with them, all the way down to my other lot, Metropolitan Community Church, and we will have justice as gay people. You know, so it's all the way down to that, and then sort of the Quakers who just think we all have to sit down and meditate about it. So you've got the full range, and you mustn't think Christianity is this monolithic something which has never done any good, because it's simply not true. So what is it? Steiner wanted to say it's one of the central planks of Western esotericism. He doesn't deny that there are myth cycles, that there are spiritual experiences that are written down, that are enumerated, that have been taught before Christianity, which sound exactly like Christianity. He doesn't want to shy clear. I mean, the Osiris mysteries in Egypt, you know, the dying god, the rising god, what does that mean? Dionysus and Apollo. So Dionysus, you know, is sacrificed to rise again, and his immortal brother is the divine Apollo. So looking similarly. What Steiner doesn't want to do is deny any of that. He's saying, no, that's all incredibly important material about something the adepts themselves would eventually bring into fruition. I'm into Swedenborg and Gnosticism. So whether these things are in the war ground of history as we normally understand it, to be honest, for me, isn't that important. Because if they're allegories, there's nothing deeper than a spiritual allegory. If they're discoveries on the inner planes, that for me sort of is more important than some very nice guy walking around 2,000 years ago and giving the thumbs up to everybody. You know, I mean, that nice, but is that really what we're all talking about? Oh God, who is that archbishop? You know, the conjuring trick in with bones thing. Jenkins, Dr. Jenkins. I knew exactly what he meant. You know, so right, you know, Schrodinger's cat. So there's a stone over the tomb. Is he alive or is he dead? You know, and you think, oh, for God's sake, so is that what it's about? And if you listen to some of these born again types, you know, so absolutely nothing has happened since then. And you, oh my God, so that's dereliction of duty, if nothing else. How disgraceful. And of course, it's not what the Bible says. I mean, if they're going to hit us all, you know, maim us to death with the Bible, I mean, that's not really what it's talking about. Now, certainly the Comforter, the Spirit, will replace Christ in this world until he comes again, whatever that means. So in terms of church history, you have the community of righteousness after Jesus Christ, which sounds incredibly like anarchism to me, and very deep socialist forms of living. You know, I mean, they shared everything. I mean, and people never read that bit. They're so busy arguing about the four Gospels, they never read things like Acts of the Apostles, where people are getting struck by lightning for hiding private property. That is very, 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 very interesting. And what was it? I can't remember where
it's interesting you say, because I started reading the Acts of the Apostles again recently, and I was quite surprised at how many of the apostles actually were given the ability to do, let's say, miracles and things like that. They were actually doing a lot of what many people say magic. You know, and the church comes across as if it's trying to say only Jesus Christ did that, but actually his apostles were doing it all as well. Maybe that's why they don't want you reading the book of the Acts of the Apostles.
You've got to shut me up if I go on too long, Debbie. Remember, I'm a gabber. I'm a gabber. Well, yeah, they don't want that. They don't want that. I mean, I love Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. I think St. Paul is a very misunderstood guy these days. You know, was he a boxer? Did he make tents? You know, whatever. You know, the great apostle. So what was he proselytizing? What exactly was he talking about? You know, I mean, and what is Christ? So for him, it's a column of light, and it speaks. You know, wow. You know, that is mind blowing. So it's not a guy; it's some sort of energy that is communicating directly with him. And certainly, you know, when he debates with the philosophers at the Areopagus, what he actually does is more interesting than people. You know, they're so busy to prove their point; they're missing all the interesting stuff. He says very clearly to the philosophers, what I'm talking about is the unknown God that you yourselves recognize. And that is what wins them over. You think, oh gosh, but that's not a trivial thing. That's actually a huge thing. So we fit into all of this. You know, we're not sort of conquering marauders, or we're not somehow inadequates beneath it all. There's a link, there's a continuum here. So yeah, I mean, Acts of the Apostles, all the little books. And they should give people clues, like the early church hated St. Peter, because he was a clear Gnostic, and they hated everything he wrote. So there's grudgingly a couple of things by Peter, you know, that have been inspired by or by him. I mean, they didn't like the fact in some of Peter's works, you get floating crosses coming out of the tomb and talking to people. They didn't like that. Oh yeah, it's all there. It's all there. Wasn't included in the Bible. I'll send you some links later.
Yes, please.
Because obviously Peter is referring to Gnostic literature, and he's actually referring to the celestial cross of stars in the sky, of which the worldly cross is simply and merely a reflection. So what he's saying is all of these things have happened forever and they're in eternity. You know, whether they happened here in history or not is one thing, but they happen in eternity forever, all the time. And that's exactly what the church didn't want, at least in the first couple of centuries. You know, the beginning of the church was meditation and prayer and a load of hippies, you know, looking for like us lot, looking for deep mysteries. And that's Christianity. That's Christianity. It's really at the end of the 2nd century, beginning of the 3rd century, that, you know, there are so many people pursuing this path, the empire decides to take notice. And then when it can't quite sweep it off the carpet, wants to do a deal.
Well, that would be the Nicene Council, wouldn't it? With Vesuvius deciding what should go in the Bible and what shouldn't. And that these naughty Arians and such like, and Arius and this lot, and who were the others?
I like Arius.
Yeah, I like Arius. Yeah, I did some of my degree on him, actually. Did a few essays on him.
Well, we have to swap notes at one point because I rather like him. And I don't like the fact he was beaten up by other members of the council. But
not very Christian.
Well, allow someone the space to think, for God's sake. Yeah, I mean, we've got to remember that if you went to any of the Gnostics in the old days and said, "Are you a Gnostic?" they wouldn't have known what you were talking about. They just said they were Christians. It's, you know, because that's one of those words like communist in McCarthy America. You know, it's used by the opponents. It's not used by them. It's not a self-description. We should understand it nowadays as a way. They were trying to make Christianity an inward experience. They felt it was that, or it made no sense. And, you know, did it happen in history? Well, all right, yes, there we are. And does that change your life? Well, maybe, maybe not.
Hopefully.
Yeah, does it happen in your heart? That's a completely different claim. Steiner. So he would have said roughly the same things. I think he defended the historicity of all of this.
He did. He does a lot about the Gnostics.
Yeah. But, you know, for him, it's much more to do with the inner planes, as Ocelot would say, and the importance of that. You know, the Christ energy, the Christ child must be born in our hearts. We must allow the Golgotha mysteries to take place inside ourselves. Otherwise, we're not Christian. We may think we are, but we've not really been born again because the Christ energy is not inside us. And, you know, sayings like each day I become less and Christ becomes more actually make no sense unless you think there's an internal reality to all of this, which then puts the enemies of Christ in a very different footing, on a very different footing. So if we're talking about the battles of consciousness, we do get to, and I'll base what I'm saying around that magnificent, talking about it the other day, that magnificent statue of his. I mean, people forget the artistry of Rudolf Steiner, you know, of Christ triumphant with a hand raised towards heaven and another hand and arm reaching down, because that's
representative of humanity, that's called.
Yeah. And I mean, I recently went to a Steinerian mass. Recently went to the Christian community. As a little MCC group, we might be thinking of working with them a lot more closely because we like what they say. They seem to like us. So we had a sort of rapid lunch with the Lenker, their version of Bishop Lenker, German stuff. And we're all going to try and see where this leads, because we don't want to play at ecumenism. You know, if we're going to do this, can we find enough common ground to actually start working together, which will be a first.
That'd be great.
If we do
I know lots of people that go to the one in London. It's a bit too far for me, but yes, that's a great place.
Oh, and it struck me a little like the old Roman Rite, which I wasn't expecting. Remember, there are one or two versions of the Rite that they use, but you know, the priest turns his back to the congregation because all of you are facing forward to the absolute. And he only turns round to make a series of symbolic poses. So it's really like sort of a transmission of energy. He turns, so he's been facing the absolute, he turns around, adopts one of the particular poses and says, you know, you who are sinful, or, you know, you who are less than. I noticed, you know, the type of psychology people wouldn't use nowadays, but was actually a part of the old Roman Rite. You know, you who are sinful, you who are without true worth, this is the Christ energy that will live inside you. And I wasn't expecting how powerful that was. You know, nowadays and I don't see anything wrong with it, and I'm part of it all. We're all busy giving a pat to each other on the back, and you know, self-help, better human value and worth, and I think that's hugely important. But I can't deny the impact that had. So you know, you realize that you're not a perfect human being. I know everybody watching this show is. I know you are, Debbie, but I can't claim to be so myself. Yeah, and all of a sudden you have somebody turning on you that does represent perfection. You think, oh my God. So I came away bouncing with criticisms, with ideas, with inspirations. Obviously, nothing could be done before Easter, because if you're in this neck of the woods, you're working yourself to a standstill at the minute. So, and is Easter coming up shortly? I love chalky eggs, if anybody's listening. So
I like fluffy bunnies. So
I love fluffy bunnies too. But I love cream eggs. I think that's. Oh no, what were those things where you got the little eggs with the caster sugar on the outside? I can't remember. I love them.
I just call them mini eggs, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no, they're all those pastel colours. Absolutely lovely. That proves I'm gay. There we go. Yeah, so yeah, like a whirlwind, a swirl of energies after we left the service, after we'd had our chat. We're not getting in touch with Lenker Thomas until after Easter because we don't want to kill him, and I can't take much more either. So we've got to keep pace until the Monday. And then we're going to say, well, okay, what can we do now? So I think it will be coming to each other's services, appreciating the differences, and then starting to talk about the similarities. I think that's probably my view of how we go forward. I mean, one of the congregation, his congregation, came up to me afterwards and said very bluntly, do you believe in reincarnation? To which I had to say, well, do you mean me as a person, or do you mean the denomination? I don't think Metropolitan Community Church has a stance on reincarnation. They've got a stance, the minute it comes to the social gospel or social justice warriors, then we've got something to say. But when it gets to the more mystical stuff, how about this? During the old Metropolitan Community Church in Balham, I remember, why don't we ever talk about me? Why don't we ever talk about anything mystical? Why don't we ever talk about anything mystical? Why don't we ever talk about mystical? Why is it always social activism? And now it's the other way round. I'm saying to everybody, oh my God, but there's what are we talking about? Why aren't we mentioning Russia and Ukraine? This is a disgrace. So it's, the way Providence works, so it's me doing the complete reverse now. I'm getting to it, I promised, Debbie. So
well, I just wanted to quickly say that with Steiner, obviously he was into reincarnation, and he says, as many of the Gnostic texts say, we do reincarnate. And this is one of the ways that the Christian, the Catholic Church, they took that away, didn't they? They didn't want to think that people could reincarnate. Only Christ can come back, not us. How dare we think we can come back to this planet?
I mean, they had a, like every other corporation, and I don't wish to take away from the witness of Catholicism. It is very, very beautiful. We can't pretend that they haven't had a corporate attitude at various times in history. We can't pretend there weren't times that didn't seem to dominate. There have been certain popes who were completely unworldly. How about Honorius III, who was a practicing ceremonial magician, and used to do grimoire-based magic in the Vatican. So, it depends what time frame we're talking about, yada, yada, yada. It depends on the incumbent. I don't know whether I like Francis or not, because he's a cuddly big liberal now. But when you were in your own country, love, you weren't a cuddly big liberal.
Yes,
so, that just makes me think, and I don't like Ratzinger. I'm not going to take Pope Benedictus. You didn't bring benediction. Sod up, you old Nazi. So, no, I don't like him much. And he, although to be fair to him, all he's saying is that we can't throw out tradition with a capital T. We must dialogue. I take back this sort of old Nazi, because that actually is very interesting. Is he a representative of tradition with a capital T? I actually don't think he is. I think he has a much more moderate ground to most people than the expectations they have of him. So what he's trying to do is walk this sort of terribly difficult line, which Francis does not, of trying to say, well, look, these are nearly irreconcilable points of view. Is there any common ground whatsoever we can reach? And that must be given the thumbs up, because who else is doing that? Nobody else is doing that.
Well, shouldn't that be not just looking for common ground? They should be just learning to accept each other for what they believe. You don't have to follow someone's belief just to let them do what they want to do. We need to do more acceptance.
They themselves to blame for this. I mean, don't forget the Inquisition hasn't finished. The Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith actually is the Inquisition. They started the idea of heretics. They were never clear what a heretic was. So somebody who's a saint one minute might be a heretic the next, and then a couple of centuries on they're a saint again. So it's very difficult to keep up with all of that. And also you get these endless retractions in Rome about where they got it wrong. So somebody's put back on a list where they've been removed. And I'm not against Roman Catholicism. There are many types of Catholicism, but I'm not against it. I think it's incredibly beautiful. But it, the sort of either or attitude, you're right, Debbie, that's unfortunate. And they sort of cornered themselves. Nobody actually did it to them. They did it to themselves. And then they don't know what to let drop and what not to let drop. So anyway, history, my own opinion is the trouble vexing the Roman Church is twofold. They're so old. I mean, it grew out of the Roman Empire, so they've got this structure at the back of their minds, the structure behind the structures that belongs 2,000 years ago. A lot has happened since then. Equally, I think, you know, you've got to, God, how am I going to put this and still stay fashionable? I don't think you'd like my crypto attack upon Ratzinger a minute ago anyway, so I've got to be a bit more careful. But it was a joke, at least in part. I don't take back a point, but at least in part. You know, and the other bit is they can't agree to disagree. They can't allow an equal flourishing of the different streams which are clearly Catholic. You know, and that's because they, I mean, if I look, I hate church politics, but it's interesting if you look at church history. You know, the Roman Church officially still believes it is embroiled in a legal battle with all these pesky Protestants for, you know, the rights to be able to proclaim things, to make decisions about things, theological judgments, and so on. I mean, even that's not true, because it's been a couple of centuries now. It might have been true about the original so-called Protestants. They were all reformers. They were reformers. They never said they were Protestants. But, you know, what grew out of their work is now Protestant Christianity. And officially, the Roman Church is in this legalistic battle with them to see who can pronounce on matters of faith. But even that's left behind in the, you know, in the basket of history now, in the wastebasket of history. You know, but they can't, because the Inquisition is still going, allow themselves to live and let live theologically, which actually was the strength, as you know, of the early church. You know, everybody let everybody cut some slack and breathe fresh air. And that's why it spread so quickly.
It was all about acceptance, wasn't it? As long as you're, you know, trying to work towards reaching the Christ energy, or Christ yourself, or bringing Christ into your heart. It didn't matter what you was doing. As long as you wasn't, you know, misusing or, you know, blaspheming the name of Christ or something, or doing some kind of satanic worship.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were things they wouldn't have gone along with. You know, at the end of the day, are we all rowing in the same direction? You know, the answer is no. You know, are we rowing in the same direction as Hitler or Stalin? The answer is no.
I hope not. Yeah.
I hope not too. You know, you know, I mean, right. Let's be fair to Big Al.
Uncle
you know,
Al.
I mean, that man. I mean, if he was alive now, he'd be the modern Jeremy Kyle. You'd never get him off TV. You know, the Madonna of his day.
Someone said to me, someone sent me a tweet. I don't do Twitter, but they sent it to me as an email, and someone's done up this Twitter thing about, wouldn't it be interesting? No, what was it? If Aleister Crowley was still alive today, what a kick-ass Joe Rogan show it would be.
But that's it. That's perfect. That's a bullseye. You know, but so, you know, if journalists weren't listening, he'd go and make sure they were by talking to them.
Yes.
You know, so right. Let's look at the evil he did. I mean, the only person he managed to marginalise was himself and some of the people around him. Some people got hurt. The court is out about who's to blame, who's not to blame. But you know, so he went around being annoying, but he didn't set up labour camps, start any world wars, have thousands of people, millions of people murdered. I mean, that didn't happen. So we've got to get a grip on all of this. Reincarnation. So I personally do believe in it. I'm not quite sure what I mean by that. You know, is it, as lots of modern Buddhists would say, the last couple of thoughts that you have before you pass on, before you pass over? Is it an actual jiva? Is it a spirit? Is it a consciousness field? Is it a series of recollections which go through the blood and the genetics? I don't know. But I think there's some sort of continuum there. It would be very strange for me if that was a part of the continuum which wasn't continuous, since every other part of the continuum is continuous. You know, and I've got a dear friend, my dear friend is Anthony Peake, who basically says what happens is consciousness in the last few critical moments goes back to the beginning of that biological life and lives it through again. And that's how you get things like deja vu. That's how you get things like theories of eternal recurrence, because that's
Recurrence, yes, this is what Nietzsche talks about, and
Yeah.
Ouspensky. And this is something I'm kind of, I must admit, when I first learned about that, I was like, that makes sense. And then so you're trying to, each time you hopefully improve in your life that bit more, and you get another chance of doing it if you screw up this time. Hopefully, and then you reach some kind of enlightenment at some point, surely, of redoing this life over and over again. And then you move on to the next stage, or join Christ, or whatever but that makes it feel like it is a mission, that we're here on this life for a reason. And this is one of my problems with a lot of people, of they don't seem to accept life for being here as a mission. Life just happens. Well, I don't think it does.
Oh yeah, and also, you what was it, that modern attitude, you get one shot. Well, maybe you don't, and if you don't, maybe there's something called responsibility. By the way, there's responsibility if you just got one shot. Don't you want children? Don't you want grandchildren? Didn't you have grandparents? I mean, it's all this sort of isolationist. What about me? Yeah, well, okay, what about you? Don't you have love for the people around you, or your own family? For God's sake, you didn't just crawl out of the earth or drop out the sky. What about people coming next? I mean, I don't know. I think,
sorry, I was going to interrupt you then, but them, which is very rude of me, but them kind of people that think like that, I really feel that was the 1980s really made it a all about yourself movement kind of thing, didn't it? And that's why I think there is this lack of love amongst people, whether it's unconditional love or brotherly love, and instead people mistake sex for love a lot, don't they? And that's why I think there's been a real, people like Steiner and such, like trying to remind people that going to Christ helps you to understand what true love is. And I don't mean man and woman, or man and man, or woman and woman fall in love, like true love, the unconditional love that the divine offers us.
I'm sorry, Debbie, I'm sick of the me attitude on this show.
You want it to be all about you.
It's all about me, let's face it. Now we're all together, let's talk about me. But the trouble is, some people, right, we're joking about it and some people mean it. That's the weird bit. But enough of my brother. Oh God, I hope he doesn't hear that. He's a very, very good boy. It's a very good boy. So reincarnation was, I suppose, the link between that, the person in that congregation and MCC with us. What they didn't realize that was, I used to be a member of the Anthroposophical Society. I recently renewed my membership. So I put it down for a long time, and I'm picking it up again and realizing, is spiritual science a synonym of gnosis? I personally think it is. Lots of people getting uncomfortable with that, but I think it is. And so okay, it's the inner Christ we're searching for. What is that inner Christ battling with to this day? And of course, nothing is the answer. If Christ is Christ, Christ is Christ. So let's look at the statue. Above him is Ahriman.
Lucifer.
Lucifer's
above.
Above him is Lucifer. There, I'm getting my demons muddled up. And below him is Ahriman. And looking at some of the work, some of the comments that Steiner made, the figure of humanity is frightened that he will damage these spirits by the sheer power and presence that he has. So already, my thoughts are reeling at all of this sort of stuff. So they must be there or they wouldn't be there. The Christ figure is worried not about the fact they have a legitimate role, but about the fact his presence will nullify that role, because obviously it must be necessary on an evolutionary level for some reason or other. And, there's a face, people hardly ever see it. If you look at the very top of the statue, there's a smiling face. And who is that exactly?
I've got it here. You carry on talking, but I'm going to try and hold this up while you speak.
Yeah. So, I think that's really important too, because who is that and what is that? And I think it's a face of reassurance. That is such a mind-blowing image. I can't even focus on it, Debbie. I mean, there's so much information there.
Isn't there? That's what I thought. When that's why I ended up getting this postcard so I can study it.
Yeah. yeah.
Because as you say, there is a face at the top,
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of the corners.
yeah,
We've got Lucifer here, Ahriman's down here,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
this is the Christ doing, like
Yeah.
you say, the
the sort of
hand.
yeah.
Because he's kind of separating them, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because I was told that if we've all got them, we've got Ahriman in us below, Lucifer in us in our heads, and we don't want them to join in our center, and that's why he's in the center to push them apart.
Well, of course, even if that's possible, even if it's possible on the inner planes, which is very, very interesting, because of all the in Steinerian thinking in anthroposophy, there are these legions of angels protecting us from the minute we're here, and by definition, then de facto when we're not here. You know, the sheer level of protection we have, it is mind-blowing. You know, legion after legion of angels. So what's going on there? Certainly Lucifer tends to mean the endless need for human beings to abstract. So, you know, it's all about an abstract heaven, an abstract Bible, an abstract ideology, and I can do whatever I want to justify that because it's, you know, all for the greater good. So that's Lucifer, really. False light in, you know, people argue about what Lucifer means. I mean, I have never got involved. I can't see the point. I mean, I bet you have too, at various pub moots where somebody's got 5 penneth to say, and then it goes on for the next 40 minutes.
Yeah.
You
Lucifer is the light. Yes, he is the light, but he was the fallen light, but he's the light that could go back up. He can be an example to us.
I have a question. Is Lucifer, you know, but it just goes on and on. So, yeah, so is it the angel?
The devil?
No, not that one, not that one. So, yeah, oh no, I'll tell you the worst ones. This is where the TS get angry with me. The worst ones I ever went to were actually in Teckles Park, and some of the most hilarious. I'm sorry, yeah, and I'm a real friend of theosophy. I'm sorry, where some old woman would say at the front, "Well, I'm sorry, I thought it was pronounced Kuma," and then the speaker would feel, you know, their dander would be up because they were being challenged. Well, I'm sorry. When I was in India, we were taught it was pronounced Kum. And then this would go on for 20 minutes and there was nothing left afterwards. So, right, pub moots I love. I stopped going to them because too many things like that happened. So, yeah, so is it the angel that brings light, the misunderstood angel? Is it the fallen angel? Is it the angel that will reascend with light? Steiner probably says all of them, but the point being, it's that level of abstract thinking, that level of abstract consciousness that ultimately leads to wafty candles, living in your fantasies alone. Therefore, this is a Luciferian world at the minute. And not really having, you know, not double checking that are things physically around you going in the right direction, or are you going to live in a police state any second now and you've not noticed? Whereas Ahriman, of course, is the complete opposite. You know, the sheer force of materialism, reductionism, that which wants to categorize, segment, that which wants the dominance of a limited frame of reference. You could say Lucifer is this near, can't be infinite by definition, near infinite level of abstraction whereby you are blinded by your own fantasies. Whereas the vile necessities, the sheer, scientism, for want of a better word, where there's nothing to discuss and there's nothing really important, you know, it all just is. That's Ahriman, the grinding power of relentless materialism, of the type that, of course, even Karl Marx wasn't actually talking about. What they were talking about were points of reference in a market economy. They were not talking about you know, grinding, terrible nihilism, which is really what Ahriman leads to. So Lucifer leads to utter daydreaming. You know, there is no life taking place. Whereas Ahriman is this terrible force, which ultimately leads to, you know, the attitude that is anything worth doing? Well, no. Curiously, both have a saving grace, not only because the Christ energy is between them and the Christ energy is the power. I just think I just can't deal with it. Every time you show me, it's just so wonderful. you know, so they
Steiner
sort of,
also says we need them both because it helps us to develop ourselves and to make sure we, you know, it's kind of like, in some ways I thought, oh, he's trying to tell us we have to have this temptation to get over it, like the Christ had the temptation in the desert. You know, this is the same thing for us.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, Steiner doesn't repudiate or deny Christianity. What he does is say we're looking at deeper levels. I mean, the best reaction I've come across, is not only me, lots of people have come across it, is that certain more mature priests have said basically anthroposophy is Catholicism for grown-ups. I sort of quite like that. And certainly my dear friend John Barnwell, I mean, he told me a story recently of an art exhibition taking place in a Cistercian or nearby, Franciscan abbey. And one of the monks, one of the friars came up to this guy and said, "Are you an anthroposophist?" And nearly frightened this guy to death, who said yes. And he said, the holy man said, "I thought so, by the way you were stood and appreciating that particular painting."
By the way,
you know, so there's a maturity at work there. And they took him back for coffee to their family house, their group house, and they had the complete works of Steiner in the library. So, you know what I'm against, Debbie, this either or thing. You know, we're all on this side, we're all on that side, because that really belongs to the inner planes. It doesn't belong to the human condition.
Yes,
that's an anthroposophical comment. And you know, it's not what we're meant to be doing. We're meant to be finding a middle ground, and we're meant to be finding the way we personally balance these forces. So certainly for Christianity, for Steinerian Christianity, I would say you're looking at the deep inner journey. I'm not against ancient aliens. I mean, my God, you ought to have met my auntie. I'm not against.
I'm just plugging in. Carry on, yeah.
Well, I'm not against things floating around in the sky. I'm not against people talking about them because it's all wonderful, and some of it is true. What I am against nowadays is people thinking phenomenology is the religious experience, which it is not. So if half a dozen aliens landed whenever, they've got the same questions we've got. You know, where's it all coming from? Is there life after death? Is there a God? You know, so all we've done is push it back a notch.
Yes, because I've had to talk to people about that, about the Anunnaki, when they throw the Anunnaki at me. It's like, well, if you actually read the Sumerian text, at some point they are talking about the great God behind them, which is Anu.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, bloody Anunnaki. You know, now the lizards annoy me, and the ants. The lizards annoy me, and the ants. I quite like the ants, even though they don't like us, apparently, because they've got exoskeletons. They think they're looking at our insides, rude bastards. So, but I like them. They're hard workers. It's these lizards. What is their problem? You know, get over it. Get over it. We're all on different evolutionary streams. Get over it, right? So.
They've got no heart.
Well, no, there's war in Lizardland. There's war in Lizardland. Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, you noticed Ike, David Ike, is now talking about a force. You mean lizards, don't you? You mean lizards.
He's using the force. I haven't watched him for a few weeks actually, but oh my God.
Oh no, I've always been fond of Ike.
I love him. I've read his books for a long time. You know, I used to go and watch him years ago before.
He's a national treasure. He's a national treasure, our Ike. I mean, I was actually one of the late producers for Art at the People's Voice when that TV channel started. I was last in, so I was first out. They made some of my shows. I mean, do you know Andrew Ray, the poet? No. Anglo-Saxon poet? He's been floating around pagan circles forever. I mean, we had some of his poetry made, but that was when the company collapsed and everybody started suing everybody. So I got some of my stuff done, and we'd actually filmed an Irish play where a couple of witches turned up, and and they were talking to this guy traveling through a stormy night, and then it turned out in the past they'd have been goddesses. And how far are they representations of the folk soul, which is why it comes up for this. And I don't think there's anything wrong or suspicious in talking about the folk soul if you know what it means. But that didn't. We don't even know what happened to the footage because everybody started suing everybody and everything got impounded. So I
Oh,
don't know what happened to that, but I'll send you some links for Andrew's stuff too, because it's very, very good. If you see light rippling over his face, which you will in some of them, that was me on my back holding up a lamp doing this. Right, and I was saying to Zach Denman, who was the head of Art at the People's Voice and my partner in crime, this is ridiculous, with him saying, "Don't worry, we'll look good on film."
and it did, I'm sure.
It did. Oh my God. You know, so right, yeah, anyway. So yeah, I mean, my trouble with all of that is that what are religious books about? Religion. Yeah, they're not badly written history books, they're not badly written technical manuals, they're about religion, the religious experience, aspects of consciousness, the soul, without guides like Steiner, without knowledge of the higher worlds, how is it achieved, without his views of Christianity, without his teaching of esotericism, then we really miss the point of what's going on there. And we've actually been caught by Ahriman at the same time, who has reduced it all to a series of material concerns. How about that for the longest answer in history?
It was brilliant. But that is why Steiner goes on a lot about, I think it's Paul that said it, isn't it? Not I, but Christ in me.
Yeah.
You know, and this is why otherwise we've got Ahriman and Lucifer in us doing everything.
Yeah.
That's why we need to embrace the Christ.
Yeah.
And not necessarily the Christ that we all grew up with, the everyday, oh, that's an awful way of saying it, the mainstream Christ. We're talking about the deep esoteric and the Gnostic Christ.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's not take anybody's thunder. I mean, people relate to that energy their own way. And that's all well and good, but you can't help but think there are deeper ways and there are more shallow ways, and there are ways that are purely ideological. You know, if I had lived and was brought up in the Bible Belt and was born again, and everybody around me had a certain ideological view of Christianity, then, you know, have I really been presented with any artillery to go beyond that? And I'm not saying they're worse than anybody else. I mean, some of the worst examples, I was talking about this recently, you know, and I love orthodoxy. I think it blows the socks up nearly anything. The liturgies are just divine. I mean, I went to Zagorsk, which is a monastery the size of a small block, in 86, however, that was aging me. Sort of, no, hang on, was it? Anyway, around then. And it, you know, there was only one way to get into Russia in those days. No, 96, sorry, 96. There was only one way to get into Russia in those days, and that was by Intourist, which was the communist agency, the only one given a license. And we had to fly Aeroflot, which was the only way in. The biggest woman I've ever met in my life was the stewardess on that plane, Ludmilla. And my God, we were all terrified of her. She'd say, "You can sit anywhere you want on this plane." "No, not there." So, and then all the Westerners were sat at the back of the plane, and it was my fault. I said, right, because that's happened, because if there's a crash, if there's an accident, everyone at the back's expendable and they all die, whereas people at the front, which is why she sat the Westerners at the back. She was so drunk by the time we got to Moscow International Airport. She was wheeling this tray of vodka up and down the aisle, and if you try and get her attention, she'd look the other way, and she was knocking it back herself. So anyway, Zagorsk. You know, we went. They weren't the Russian commos, at least at that phase. Remember, it's building up to Glasnost and all that sort of thing. I've still got that date wrong. I just start trying to think what that date is, but it's somewhere in the middle of that. It was my first genuine exposure to orthodoxy, you know, all guns blazing. Our Tatiana, I seem to remember, was our tour guide, a party member. She wouldn't go into the monastery with us because she said the old ladies would be insulted because there was a communist in there. We were very, very impressed. We were very, very impressed by that. She opened this little wooden door in the side of this huge wooden wall, and I was thinking, my God, what are we in for? And it was like walking into paradise. I've never, ever, 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 ever seen anything like it in my life. Everywhere you looked, endless corridors of gold and silver with candles sparkling. There was nothing else apart from gold and silver. I've never seen anything like it. With Russian choral chanting rising and falling like the angels at the back of it all. And I was so gobsmacked. I didn't say anything for the next 2 hours. I've never seen anything like it. So that's the divine side of what they do. I developed an interest in orthodoxy from that day. And we have to be honest. I mean, those are national churches, nationalist churches. Doesn't mean they're demonic. It just means that they had to adopt that attitude to survive. Orthodoxy, because of the geography of various areas, Greece in particular, maybe, they had to adopt those firm cultural positions. Otherwise, they'd have been swept away. It was as simple as that. But if you adopt that sort of ethnic attitude, this church represents a particular type of ethnicity, then clashes will occur. And the downside is nowadays it can be imperialistic, it can be triumphalistic. And that for me is not Christianity. It's not representing what we're talking about and never will. And the people in those traditions that know that are really hamstrung, because how do you deconstruct the very mechanisms that kept the whole thing alive? So rather like Catholicism, how do you do that? So, I'm not saying everyone should rush off and be non-mainline church, but I'm saying, let's be a bit more tolerant of what they're doing and why they're doing it, because there are actual reasons behind why they're doing it. I'm not saying let them off the hook for when they did wrong, the witch trials, the witch burnings, although of course most of that was Puritan and Protestant. It was the Catholic Church that had it in for heretics, but it was the Protestant churches that had it in for witches. So we've got to think, but how much is that a part of the time frame and the outlook? And let's face it, our ancestors were by no means saints, and they're us at a more simple level in all sorts of ways, without the scientific grasp of life around us, in a more fearful world, knowing less about nature and what we're up against in life, without psychology, without anything beyond your particular tribe, and your tribe is far from perfect. So I think we need to be a little more tolerant, and maybe this is where Steinerian, anthroposophy in the Christian community come in a little more, because if they hold so hard to the inner journey, no matter what, and folk souls are a part of that inner journey, that there is some sort of mystical link, there is some sort of metaphysical bond between a group. Now, I think Steiner does use the word ethnic, but for me, I think he's fighting with that word, because it's the word, but it's not the word. And I think it comes very clearly across in some of his writings. What else do you say? But if you start looking at who he includes in the ethnicity, they simply don't fit. There are all sorts of people that never fit a particular phenotype, a particular color, a particular race, a particular history. He's always going out of his way to say, well, no, those people are included in that folk soul.
I think this is why he was mistaken for being a racist sometimes, because people just didn't understand what he was saying. Because I actually was, it must have been before all this recent 2-year doodah. We did the folk soul lectures at Steiner House. I was at them classes, and it was very interesting how he talks about, the northern tradition, the Eastern tradition, then you'd have the traditions in between of the countries, and the Egyptian tradition that was having the Egyptians were no longer around anymore, but their ancient traditions still passed on to future traditions of peoples, and all the folk souls. They weren't fighting each other, the folk souls that were on the top of each nation. They were doing what they had to do for that nation at that time, to try and lift it back up, which is why all these different nations are at different stages, because not all the folk souls are quite up to date with what they should be doing or working at different stages.
I'm really tempted to say something there, but I'm going to choke.
Go on then.
Choke my, no. I'm going to choke my response. I think anthroposophy, getting back into it all, it's made me aware that, anthroposophy in Britain if you go outside of our circles, you know, witches, pagans, heathens, if you go out, you know, weirdo Gnostics, if you go outside our circles and you start asking people, have they heard of it? The answer is no. And if you sort of do mention it and they bother to look into it, which mostly they don't, you know, you get they get the impression you need 5 PhDs to understand a lecture at Rudolf Steiner House, which actually sometimes is
Sometimes
true.
you do, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, and yet what on earth was he talking about? And so, you know, there is a truth to that. And maybe not, unfortunately, you know, we need to stretch ourselves, but, you know, at the right time and in the right way. I think the attitude in Europe is much more that it's just sort of this yet another heavy institution that people can do without. So I think that's the sort of continental view of it all. As usual, the Americans, and that's said with great love to my American chums, seem to have this weird view of it all, where because they can't get to grips with a cultural movement, with a social and cultural and artistic society. So therefore, some of the things I've heard from Bible Belt inspirations, like it's a cult, or like it's false Christianity, or it's Luciferian, and you think, my heavens, you know, that's actually you're going out of your way to misrepresent what it is, but you feel comfortable with that. And yeah, I mean, I've heard it, you know, I heard on, I think it was on YouTube a couple of months ago, that if you thought Blavatsky was bad, wait till you get to Rudolf Steiner. You must be kidding, because that shows you read neither of them.
Exactly.
But, you know, sound bites in the modern world. And actually, good old Helena, Chubby Chops, you know, I mean, she's not the world's biggest racist. I mean, you know, she's very clear that she's talking about types of consciousness. You know, does that embody in physical, in the physical world? Of course it does, but she's very, 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 very clear what she's talking about. And Steiner's even worse. You know, he goes out of his way to try and define what he's not addressing directly. I mean, I think, you know, if people willfully want to misrepresent any of us, they can do that. I mean, I've had it done to me. And, you know, what do? You put on a brave face, you smile, you keep going. If that's what floats your boat, good on you. Make sure you don't do it back, because that's just not terrible. It's bad for karma.
Yes, karma on you.
Yeah, you know, because that's just terrible. And then we all end up sinking into this sort of horrible miasma of dislike. And anyway, so, you know, so folk souls, karma, reincarnation, all very, very active terms and thoughts in anthroposophy. And I think the most misunderstood at the moment is the idea of a folk soul, because it's literally a field of metaphysical identity that can include people from completely different parts of the world, of different races, of different upbringings. And it's an empowering idea. You know, my friends from the darkest parts of Africa, that was deliberately said, can all of a sudden be Berliners more than most of the Berliners around them. I think that's incredibly fun. That's incredibly exciting and true. You know, it just shows people haven't traveled enough if they think that can't occur. And if they think that people in Africa don't think like that, I've got some friends in Kenya that, my God, they would be some of the biggest snobs if ever they got to Paris or Berlin. And let's get them there. Let's see what happens. You know, but no, you know, it's this constant belittling of difference. Vive la différence. You know, difference has become dangerous. How has difference become dangerous? And maybe it's dangerous if it's seen on the level of physicality and phenotypes and genetics and chromosomes. But that's exactly what they're not talking about. They're not talking about these things as zoologists, biologists, chemists. They're talking as metaphysicians and esoteric authors. And the minute that's taken away, because we all need to think gods are ancient astronauts and, you know, ancient technology is the riddle of it all. And that's why I'm against that, or at least I need to put it into the correct place, because that's when you do end up with that sort of very unfortunate and potentially dangerous mix, which must be from the mouth of Ahriman himself. What do you think, Debbie?
I would agree with you on that, because at first, I love ancient aliens. It's my, what do they call it when it's your secret pleasure kind of thing, my guilty pleasure.
Yeah,
but I do see it doesn't go too deeply into things. It's a very shallow understanding, and it does mislead people. But I do also know that ancient aliens made some people I know start thinking, oh,
Yeah.
what is out there? And then they did start going to things like Gurdjieff, Steiner, Blavatsky, Swedenborg, and a lot of people went to Nicholas Roeg from it. But I think that's probably because Ancient Aliens uses a lot of Roeg art.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I can see how it dumbs it all down. But if it helps some people start questioning, good on it.
Oh yeah. Look, again, don't get me wrong. Good on all of it. Good on all of it. You know, get the brain working, get the juices flowing, get the imagination, you know, it active, but don't leave it there. Don't leave it at a particular point. I mean, I was meant to be debating von Daniken. I don't think it's going to happen in the next couple of months. God, I mean, I've been, you know, he's part of all of our lives, isn't he? Yes. I remember reading him at school. How old is he? You know, and reading, you know, Was God an Astronaut, Chariots of the Gods, and thinking, wow, that's amazing. My trouble, and we use him as an example simply because he's not a bad boy and he's a good man at heart, you know, is the you know, the book of Ezekiel, Wheels Within Wheels. Actually, the God that's riding that chariot is very clearly described. And it's not, you know, it's not little grey men. It's clearly a God. And the wheels within wheels, you know, the days that circle into the weeks that circle into the months that circle into the seasons that circle into the years that circle.
Cosmic calendar.
Yeah. So only a God could ride that type of chariot. You know, and also if you're looking at, you know, the amber and the fire that help configure that God. So clearly it's the divine Apollo or analogous imagery to his. I must say divine Apollo because what I meant to say, you know, it resembles, you know, it's a reflection of, and that symbolism must have been used deliberately, I think, by Ezekiel. You know, so what are we meant to be doing? We're meant to be looking completely above all of these wheels, all of these cycles. So, you know, I think von Daniken loses out with that one, but I'm going to give a personal anecdote of where I was wrong. At university, my first time round, I majored in Hinduism and minored in Buddhism because I wanted to see what other people were saying, and enjoyed every single minute. You know, I mean, the stories of Krishna. I mean, that is Christianity. That is Christianity. You know, so it's just
hanging out with the cowgirls.
With the cowgirls and everybody dancing and singing. Right? Yeah, I know exactly what's going on there. You know, an endless light and flowers and yeah, right. I know what I'm doing. But you know, I remember saying snootily at various meetings in the past, scriptures never talk about technology. Scriptures, you know, only talk about realities of the spirit. And of course, there are Puranas. There are types of sacred literature. And that was my lack of knowledge, forgive me, which shows we've all got to keep on top of things. There are Puranas which actually do say they're discussing ancient technologies, and they do describe what those technologies are. So the ancient alien people were right in that. You know, the Vimana, the flying machine of the ancients, actually is there amongst the ancient documents. And to my horror, when I finally read it, it's how you get magnetized mercury flowing in two directions at the same time, which defies the force that keeps you on the ground. With me thinking, oh my God, so much technological description. That's a technological description. But you know, when you're looking at the sophistication of something like somewhere like India, you know, where is, you know, they're clear about what's metaphysical, they're clear about what's philosophical, they're clear about what's historical, unlike the West, for whatever reason, has had to sort of get those different categories clearly in its minds. You know, its mind before it progressed slowly. You know, festina lente, hasten slowly, which is what we did. And you know, look at the power of the West now because it did that. You know, is anybody really willing to say, because Steiner wouldn't have been, that mathematical physics isn't one of the greatest spiritual achievements of the human race? You know, you must be a very dull-witted person not to see the astonishing power, insight, beauty that has allowed us in the cosmos. You know, the fact that people can map the cosmos with numbers. I mean, the ancients would have gone berserk at that. And if that's true, and by the way, it is, because they're doing it all the time at NASA at the minute. It proves that the universe is intelligible. And that means you're on very, very religious ground indeed. Therefore, that is not a waste of time, and it's not something we need to kick into touch. That proves that maybe we were all in the right in the first place.
Well, they say Steiner did used to talk about this, but maybe not in the terminology that we would use today.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I chose a very deliberate, you know, now happening way of saying because that's really what they're talking about. I mean, I think the great genius in comparative literature is Chubby Helena. Oh no, that, I mean, come on, you've read it too, Debbie. It's a genius book. It's an ingenious book. You know, and the fact, I mean, she's got such a grasp of so much. You know, it really, it's almost like you can't really believe it's one person that's written it. Of course, it is. You know, no matter what inspiration and sources she had, it's one person, and that's astonishing. And to think that Steiner is nearly, if not as equally astonishing, by saying, look, all of the terms of Hinduism and Buddhism, and of course, they're also in disagreement about what some of those terms mean, are directly applicable to the mystery traditions of the West, where we have said similar things. And we have the Christ experience on top of that, in a sense, you know, that we have humanized. We've given humanity back to the cosmos. And all right, so all of a sudden then you're on Kabbalistic grounds. So what are we talking about with Adam? What are we talking about with Eve? And that's now all mathematically provable, you know, that everything is human, as Blake would have said. Because that's the only way human beings can perceive the cosmos around them. And that's built into us for whatever, you know, however and whatever. All of a sudden you're in very, very serious anthroposophical territory, which I think only the AS, oh God, I'm rambling now. I think they're not good at seeing the treasures that they've got. I think they're not good at seeing, because they're all so used to it, you know, and they've all been hounded and they've all been attacked like anybody else with good ideas. But you know, they're sort of on the defensive a bit. They're not seeing the revolutionary power in the idea like a spiritual science, which actually is using those methods and those categories to get to the next stage. You know, once that's there, and all the terminologies that are being used from the East, you know, can be compared in lexicons. They can be analyzed. They can be looked at. And we can then find correspondences within mystical Christianity. That must be one of the most important achievements any human being has ever done, because all of a sudden we've got common ground on which to discuss the religious experience of mankind, of humankind itself.
Well, I think also with some of it is because I'm going to poo-poo societies now. Societies get off running, all going well, and then suddenly they become stagnant and stuck in their ways, and they can't see the bigger picture because they're following the rules that they started at the beginning when they should be expanding, which is why thankfully we have the internet.
Yeah.
And lots of people are talking about Steiner on the internet. They might not be part of the Anthroposophy Society, but he's being looked into and people are applying it to their spiritual paths and soul paths.
Yeah.
But I did want to say that
very important that you said that, you know. I mean, certainly it's actually people outside the Anthroposophical Society that made me a couple of years ago think maybe I was hasty in leaving them. But you know, it's Christian Witness. There used to be a little tiny anthroposophical shop near Atlantis Bookshop. I think it closed out. I can't remember the name.
Yes, it did.
I can't remember the name of the guy who used to run it. I'd go in there looking for books, and I'd always end up in deep conversations with him. He passed on, but he was so alive and he was so into anthroposophy that I remember coming away from those meetings feeling disturbed. You know, gosh, he's on to something there. He's got something there. And oh my God, it's in the Anthroposophical Society. Because I agree, you know, societies tend to become moribund over time. And, you know, and that's just what they do to survive, and that's okay. But maybe it just needs reviving sometimes, because then it's even better than okay. And, you know, then doing this show with John Barnwell, who of course is an anthroposophist. I don't know what his relationship with the society is, but suddenly thinking, oh gosh, it's given me a way of discussing what is difficult to discuss without that map. And that's why, for me, spiritual science is becoming so important, and anthroposophy itself, with its description, because you can start working out who Ahriman and Lucifer actually are in other systems. You can work out that the figure of humanity is Krishna, you know, which you wouldn't be able to if you weren't au fait with the map. They've suddenly, not, I mean, they've partly been given it, but they've also partly developed it. And they must be, speaking as an anthroposophist, you'd be less afraid of people adding to the map. That's what happens to maps. They get improved over time. So I think it's very exciting. And the fact you can see, as I say, Krishna in the role of the great human walking through the cosmos and history wouldn't have struck me until recent times.
Well, I wanted to, because I'm noticing the time, and I'm going to have to go soon myself. But we were saying about
anything, Debbie. Have I asked anything?
Oh, you've done a wonderful. I'm loving this completely, and I'm looking forward to doing more. But I was going to say, we were saying about, you know, I feel like Ancient Aliens dumbs it down, but then that's what has opened the way for people like yourself to have the conference that you're having in the autumn. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your conference. I'm going. I'm really looking forward to it.
Can't wait to see you in the flesh, as they say. Oh my God, a Basil Brush moment.
Boom, boom.
Whatever happened to him? And yeah, I mean, I for my sins, which are many, I'm the founder of Nephilim Anthropology Conference. This will be our third meeting. It will be over the weekend. I got talked into it over the last couple of days. On the 29th of October and the 30th of October. Is the timing deliberate? Yes and no. I defy anybody to book less than 6 months ahead and get the dates they want. I'm sorry. Right. So yes, it's obviously got some significance because we're coming up to the autumn. Was it sort of to do with Halloween? Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. And they were good dates, and I thought that sounded fun. We've got an international lineup of considerable reputation. I'll go through some of them very quickly, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, because I'm also going to put a link to it in the that little box thing that's on the YouTube channel.
I mean, all I do is give the Steve Ash Memorial Lecture, so nobody should be put off coming. We've got the, as I say, we're at David Game College on the Saturday. That's the long hall where the ancient aliens turn up. Hopefully, we're at Rudolf Steiner House on the Sunday. I'm in the communication with them at the minute to see what room we can get, because of course it's a busy time for the society around there. But we've got people like Professor Michael York, who is known to both of us. I think he might have to pre-record his for a number of reasons. Andrew Goff of the Discovery Channel, talking about the inner Earth, inner species, those bloody insects again, and reptiloids. So he's going to be a great chum of ours. We've got Mog Morgan, who we both know, occultist, CEO and head of Mandrake of Oxford, good chum. I believe he'll be wearing that ridiculous hat again to make him look like an Egyptian mystic.
He is an Egyptian mystic.
Mog, I love you, you know that. Keep wearing the hat. We've got a psychic Alan Cox. We've got Rob Hall, the up-and-coming conspiracy theorist. We've got Vladimir Wiedemann, the incredibly well-known Estonian author, who will be talking about the science behind it all. How much can we say for certain, and where does it become speculation? That needs to be there. And you'd be surprised how far it goes before you reach speculation. We've got the Reverend Jim Wilhelmsen, firm chum of mine, conservative evangelical. How about that? Who says he was abducted by aliens and prayer saved him. And he's also written about giants in the inner earth. The author of Beyond Science Fiction, a remarkable guy, worth seeing. Stedman, the heathen, who's getting very interested in Hinduism at the minute, as far as I understand.
Yes, yes.
There's a link on. Hopefully we've got Ra Castaldo. God, how do you describe
coming over from America? Well, I know him more. I don't know him personally, but I watch a lot of his shows where he talks about the Egyptian mysteries and the start of humanity, in a way, of keeping on that spiritual path. He does a lot of the pyramids, and he makes not organite, but he makes crystals and things, doesn't he?
And it's something to do with Squids in Space or something. But
Oh, that's a new one on me. Okay, I didn't know about that.
Good luck to them. So they throw meteorites around or something. So Squids in Space, we want to chat about a very, very fun guy and a very knowledgeable guy. We've got Gary Wayne, which many people, including yourself, young lady, weren't too sure of if you want Bible Belt views of it all.
I'm going to look him up. Sounds interesting.
Conservative evangelical who is convinced the Nephilim are an historical reality, I would never dream of going that far. He's convinced they were living, they were breathing, they were big, they were bastards, and they need studying because they're coming back. Now, there's a scary thought. We've got Heather L. Arnold, our own Lara Croft, who's actually been to some of these places. I think she's some sort of feminist pagan. If you're not Heather, forgive me.
That's
but
a good way of putting her.
Look at your post, love. Look at your post. You know, to Easter Island. She's been to Aruba. She's been to these places. She's convinced they were giants, not quite on Gary Wayne's level. And they were basically an offshoot of us, or we're an offshoot of them. And they had civilizations before us. And we hated them and they hated us. Yeah, but look, we're still here. We're still here. So we've got Johan Alsted coming over from Norway, who's going to talk about dreams, giant forces moving around the collective unconscious, younger people's attitude to Nephilim. We've got the infamous, I'm trying to fit all this into one go. Kapil Gupta, who may be, he's trained in humanistic psychology. So if a bust-up starts, he can actually calm everybody down. We'll all be chanting for the next hour. I think, is that about it? We've got
Maria Wheatley.
We've got Leo Zagami.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's about
but people can see the list when they go to the link for the Nephilim conference, which it's Nephilim anthropology.
Yeah, Nephilim anthropology, naked up. I mean, we've got people jetting in from different parts of the globe to make this a genuine historical occurrence. This is the first time all those different points of view have met and discuss true origins, UFOs, ancient aliens, hard science, anthropology, sociology, the arts, the inner journey, mysticism, the occult, and the religious perspective. No one has ever put a conference together like that. There are refreshments for that, because I don't like military operations. There are refreshments running through Saturday, and I've saved the best till last. We've got Mr. Megalithomania himself, a friend of yours, I believe.
I know him, yeah, Hugh Newman. Not really well, but we've met quite a few times. The wonderful Hugh Newman. The
wonderful Hugh Newman. We couldn't do it without. Hugh has this encyclopedic knowledge of earthworks, monuments, ley lines, mysteries. If anyone's going to draw these different threads together, it's going to be our Hugh. This is an absolutely unique meeting, and it will be the first time everybody's actually together. Come and make history with us.
Yes, everybody. Let's all go. It's going to be great. You've put on a great show. I'm really looking forward to it. But before that happens, I'm sure we'll have got together again and done lots more little shows anyway.
Oh, I hope so. This is the one I look forward to. I was telling you off air, I do quite a few, but this is the one I look forward to.
Oh,
great thinking alike.
Right, well, I'm going to end the show on that one. So everybody do look up David's website. It's just David Parry, isn't it, .com?
DavidWilliamParry.com.
That's it, yeah, it's DavidWilliamParry.com, but I'll put that in the notes as well.
If you read about the biggest puff in the country, go to my website.
Oh, thank you ever so much. This has been brilliant. I've, as always, loved it. So thank you everybody for watching, and do check out the links that I'm going to put below. So thanks again, David. Bless you.